Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar presented by Beth Hendler-Grunt called The Next Great Step, Bridging the Gap from College to the Real World. Before I introduce today's presenter, I want to go over how the webinar will work. First of all, you'll be able to view the presentation on your computer screen. You should all see it now. You'll also be able to hear the presentation through your computer's audio system. We want you to ask questions by typing them in, and we're going to monitor that. In fact, Beth is going to engage you with questions, so feel free to answer her questions by typing them in as well. Any questions that are not answered in today's webinar may be addressed after the webinar is completed, and Beth will have her contact information on one of the slides. And now I'd like to introduce today's topic and speaker. Beth Hendler-Grunt is the founder of Next Great Step. She's a dynamic leader, advisor, and facilitator with extensive experience advising top business leaders, universities, and individuals, guiding them to success. Next Great Step addresses the challenges of college students and graduates by helping them achieve career success. Beth earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the John M. Olin School of Business at Washington University in St. Louis, and a Master's of Business Administration from the Stillman School of Business at Seton Hall University with honors. She's been featured on Sirius Radio and in New Jersey Biz Magazine. And now to tell you how to take the next great step, I'd like to introduce Beth Hendler-Grunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Just wanted to make sure my audio, everyone can hear me okay? Great. Thank you so much for hosting me today, and I'm really excited to be speaking with all of you. So just so everyone knows who you're speaking with, want to share with you what I look like. Let's see if we can get the slides going here. Hold on. Sorry about that. I'm going to get this together here. Let's see. Well, maybe not. How come my slides aren't moving? Oh no.
Hang on 2 seconds.
Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so welcome. This is me. Really excited to be with all of you. And before we get started, I would love to get a sense of who is on the call today. So if you could, in your chat box, if you could type one of the following, and whichever you think fits you best, that would be great to help me understand who is on our call today. Okay. All right, great. So I think we have a nice
parent and soon to be graduate.
Yes,
okay.
Excellent. So I think we have a nice
graduate.
Great, a nice mix of people. So I always like to know who's on with us. And my goal is to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free. I'll have chances for you to chat some answers to questions that I'll have. And if you have specific questions, I will do my best to answer them. And if not, I will get to them at the end of our talk. I will probably talk for about the next 30, 40 minutes, and I will leave plenty of time for Q&A. So, how does this picture make you feel? So it's a combination of excitement and great accomplishment, but at the same time, it's anticipation and potentially fear about what's ahead. So here's your first question for you. So this month, 1.8 million students will graduate college. The question is, and if you can put the answer in the chat box of what you think the answer is, how many, so give me a percentage, what percent will have a job after graduation? And I'd like to see what people think the percent is. So I have a 30%, I have a 50%. No job yet. So a couple of ranges. So the number is actually 17%. Oh, 5%?
And someone said 0.
And 0. Well, the number is actually 17%. So 1 out of 6 graduates will have a real job, meaning a job that you went to school for, and translating that into a career. Just this past Sunday in the New York Times, they ran an article about 2016 graduates. And unfortunately, they said that today's graduates still face employment conditions worse than in 2007. In 2015, 45% of graduates ages 22 to 27 were in jobs that did not require a degree. So clearly some challenges in front of you. Understanding is, like many of you, you are seeing the reality of how difficult it is to get a job or even an interview. You may get the interview, but then you wonder why the employer never calls back. And this may happen over and over again. Even more, how do you take your major and decide what kinds of positions to apply for and apply it to a real job? The challenge also is students have been in a structured environment for the last 16 years with a clear syllabus and clear instructions on how to get the grade. Now, the business world and the job market, the rules are not quite so clear. And sometimes this feeling of fear starts to creep in. For the parents that are on, I have a question for you, and even if you're not a parent, I encourage you to answer this question. So what % of parents expect to support their student after college? So give me your opinion. How many people think, what % of parents are going to be supporting their college student once they graduate? I'm waiting for a few answers here. Let's see who responds. Any guesses? Oh, someone said 75%. That's high. 50%. That's another one. So the number that is the statistic, 20. Well, that's hopeful from another optimistic. So the answer is actually 65%. 65% of parents expect to support their kids up to 5 years after they graduate from college. However, I'm sure that's not ideally what they're looking to do. Candidly, many parents are trying to help their child be financially independent and ultimately want them off the payroll and hopefully move out of the house. I am here today to help you or your student get a better understanding of the skills and value they have and how to bring them to the market in a successful way. Our job is to help bridge the gap from college to the real world. In order to understand our process of guiding students, I will highlight students I have worked with and how we apply these techniques to help them get a job. So let's get started. So let me introduce you to Andrew. Andrew came to me. He was a graduate from University of California in San Diego. Really bright young man, had great internships, was focused on pharmacology and then changed direction, realizing he didn't want to be a pharmacist, but had a really good experience in working with some drug companies and formulations, doing research, and very, very determined to get a job. And you would think, well, what could possibly be his challenges? He has all these things going for him. But like everyone has some concerns and some weaknesses that they're afraid of as they move forward. So in Andrew's case, he was worried that he didn't have enough experiences or internships when he graduated to really get him into the job that he wanted. He was worried that maybe he didn't have the higher level degrees that were needed. He was afraid. He had a particular internship where he didn't quite get along with the people he was working with, and he was worried about moving into other opportunities and maybe not matching with their culture. So Andrew and I took a look at what we could do and the process. So this is a process of how we approach to bridge the gap. The first thing Andrew and I did was look at, what does success mean? What does success mean for him? And we talk about understanding his priorities versus those of others. And the first thing we talked about was this idea of a stakeholder. So this is your opportunity to fill in on the chat window. Can anyone tell me what a stakeholder is? And I'll wait. Let's see if anyone types anything in. I'll give it a few seconds. No one's going to tell me what a stakeholder is? You're not quite so sure? Okay, well, I will share it with you. A stakeholder is someone who has a vested interest in your success. So for Andrew's case, his stakeholders were his parents and his brother, as well as friends, and then he had a couple of mentors from college. These are people that are interested in you being successful. And in other situations, by the way, a bank would be interested in your success as well because they want you to pay back the loans. But in Andrew's case, he had an interesting story. Both of his parents were PhDs. One was a PhD in civil engineering, and the other one was a PhD in biostatistics. And in their mind, he would not be considered successful to them unless he had a PhD. And that's a lot of pressure, and he wasn't sure if that was the direction he wanted to go. On the opposite end, he had an older brother who was in healthcare software, and he said, oh, don't worry, you don't need a higher level degree, you just need to make a lot of money. So clearly the influences in his life had conflicting opinions, and he had to really figure out for himself what success looked like for him. So that's what we did. We talked about this idea of a vision for himself. What does it feel like, the kinds of things that he'd want to be doing down the road in the next 2 to 5 years? In Andrew's case, he said, I really want to focus on sciences and healthcare, potentially working with people. He knew he had good attention to detail, and he tends to have empathy for people. So he didn't have to know the name of the job. He just had a sense of the kinds of things he wanted to be doing. And from there, we were able to establish some real milestones and goals for him to work towards. Based on conversations, he said, you know what, I think I might want to pursue a career in nursing, but he still needed to finish course requirements and understand whether he needed to shadow other nurses to understand the exact role. So we set some milestones, and from an education standpoint, certain types of certifications he would need, as well as certain types of people he would need to network with. And that really helped him set the path for where he wanted to go. The next part of the process is this idea about value and how a candidate can bring value to an employer. Because everyone has a value, it's just a matter of how do you articulate that. So here's another question for everyone, especially the students, but everyone's welcome to answer. So why will someone hire you when you went to the same school with the same grades as the person next to you? Anyone give me some answers? I'd like to see some ideas of how do you start to differentiate yourself when on paper you look the same as other colleagues that you went to school with. Somebody's typing likability. Okay, that's absolutely a possibility. Any other ideas about how you can differentiate yourself? Your work ethic, very good. Approachable, standing out. Good, so those are all very good things that you can bring to the table. Here's another one, how you market yourself. Great, thank you for those great comments. Well, the idea is that those are all very good ways to bring your skills and your knowledge to an employer. The challenge is other people can say a lot of the same things. Very often someone will say to me, well, I'm hardworking and I'm very responsible. Well, that's great, and so are the last 6 people who came to talk to me. So how do you go beyond that? So there's 3 types of ways that you can express the skills that you bring to an employer. The first one is what we call intangible. It's where you describe the skills you have to someone solely in words, in descriptions. So some of you just use that. I'm approachable. I'm good at marketing myself. I'm very likable. So those are absolutely ways that you can describe yourself. But the suggestion is that how can you make yourself stand out even more? And the next idea would be, well, how can you actually start to quantify what you can do for an employer? So not only are you likable and hardworking and responsible, but what else can you do? So for example, could you potentially, because you had a background in retail, or you've worked and had internships working in stores, could you tell the owner of the store, I could maybe help you bring in 3 new customers a day because I'm really creative in my marketing, or I understand customer needs. So now you start to grab their attention that, 1, you're thinking about skills that you have and how you can relay it to their business, but 2, you start solving a problem for them about how you can help them grow their business or do something that's challenging them. But the ideal scenario is how can you impact a business in terms of dollars? And companies really measure themselves only in 2 ways. Either you're going to help them make money, or you're going to help them save money. And if you can communicate how you can do that, even if it's not exactly precise, and I get the question a lot saying, well, I just graduated college. How could I possibly tell someone I'm going to help increase their revenue by 5%? Well, maybe you may not, but the fact that you're thinking about it and that you are taking the time to research what the problem is that they are dealing with and that you have ideas about how to solve it, this is where you start to set yourself apart from others, as opposed to yes, being likable and approachable and responsible are all really good, but the more you can really get to the heart of how you're helping to solve a business problem, that is where you add value, and that is where you start to differentiate yourself. In Andrew's case, he was actually applying for a job in clinical research at Stanford. So he was based in California, and he wanted to work in their medical facility that did some research and testing. And we talked about the words that he used to describe himself was, trustworthy, detailed, empathetic, good communicator. So those are great ways to describe yourself. But as I said before, lots of other people can say the same exact thing. He thought because he was really efficient, he could potentially help them increase the number of trials they completed, or that he had a really personable way of talking with people that he could increase the number of patients surveyed, or that he connected with doctors well and would get more doctors to participate in the study. Or ultimately, in his case, how Stanford, in terms of their trials, made money was helping pharmaceutical companies bring drugs to market faster. And then there was a lot of money to be had. So if he could show that how he could either be more efficient by having more patients in the trials or help them save time for FDA approval, those are real dollars that starts to impact how they solicit clients and other pharmaceutical companies down the road. So this was a way to help himself differentiate, and he actually did get that position. But it gives you a sense that it's just not the words, kind of thinking more about putting yourself on the other side of the table about what the employer really worries about and how you can help them in resolving that. Okay. Now you understand what success looks like for yourself, and you understand how to communicate your value. So the other component that's key is developing a strategy. And it's really about just answering a few questions and knowing for yourself what those answers are. So let me introduce you to Brittany. Brittany was another student that came to me looking for some guidance, and she graduated from Brandeis with a health science, society, and policy degree, which is a loaded statement there. But she was really focused on working with children. She really interested in the nonprofit market and was considering working either in special ed or trying to figure out what to do next. And she had a great energy, great attitude about her. But like Andrew, she had some concerns as well. She feared that she just wasn't good enough. Even though she had great experience and great grades coming out of school, she feared that she had lost out on previous jobs and was concerned about getting rejected again. And she was worried primarily, too, if she was to pursue certain areas, she didn't have a master's degree and what to do next. So she knew eventually she was going to get her master's, but she had this year between graduating and applying to grad school that she needed to find a job. So for Brittany, we stepped through these questions of strategy to help her focus. The first question was understanding what skills did she bring to the market, really knowing what she was good at and what people told her she was good at, but really also what is she excited about doing every day. And we would work on understanding what those things are. In Brittany's case, she narrowed down and realized she really had a strength with children. She also felt that she was really looking to work in a therapeutic environment, specifically also in schools environment. And that really helped her to start narrowing in on the kinds of positions and types of work to look at. The other thing we took a look at is, well, who does she want to bring her skills to? So she could work in schools anywhere, and that goes for a lot of specialties. But where do you want to work, and what industry, and how do you narrow down the way you look for your job? So for her, coming out of a Boston school, she actually wanted to stay in Boston. And she said, you know what, I want to be in an elementary level school. I also want to be in a school that has a strong special ed program. And that helped her to narrow down the kinds of jobs that she pursued and the kinds of, it did two things, narrow down what she pursued, but also helped her be able to better explain when someone says, so tell me about yourself and what are you looking for? She had a really clear answer. She was able to clearly articulate her skills and demonstrate examples of how she did it. And she knew where she wanted to be. So people understood how to move forward with her because she had a clear answer for that. The other things we took a look at was understanding why companies hire and why do they need someone now versus Not at all. And understanding the problems that they're going through, as well as the same question before is, well, why would they hire you over someone else? And not only in being able to articulate your value, but how do you actually compete head to head with someone who you know might have certain skills that you don't have, and how do you negate that in an interview and promote other things you have? So those were key concepts for Brittany and how we move forward. And just one concept here that helps when we move forward with a strategy is the idea that you have core skills. Core skills are those skills that you are most competent, most skilled at. And when you focus on your core, you will have a much greater chance of success of getting jobs in those areas. It can be very distracting, especially when you graduate, and people come from all different areas and say, oh, I know somebody, and you should go talk to this person. And I highly encourage networking. But knowing yourself, what you want and what you're good at and what you want to pursue will help you do better. Your core are those things that you're also good at. You could do them as well, but maybe you're not going to spend as much time. And outfield is when you are given an offer of something completely out of scale. So in Brittany's case, I'll use the example, it wasn't true. If someone came to her and said, oh, Brittany, I have a great job offer for you. It's in accounting, and it's in Alaska, and I'm going to pay you a lot of money, but she'd have time to consider it. But the more you consider things that are not really what your expertise is, you take away from your core skills. So just a concept to think about and we use to help to make decisions. So far we've figured out what success looks like, how to articulate your value, and how to create a strategy. So now what do you do when someone says, great, come on in for an interview? Or a friend of the family says, come on over, let's talk, let's have coffee. How do you plan ahead for these interactions where you get the most optimal outcome and the outcome that you want to have happen, as opposed to waiting for them to ask you questions and hoping they ask you a good one? So the real question is, are you ready? Are you ready for these interactions and to have them be successful? So the suggestion here is, how do you plan ahead? And the approach is to plan ahead with this concept called the 3 A's. The first A is something we call actions. Actions are thinking about, when I'm done having this conversation or meeting, what do I want the other person to actually do or agree to do following our meeting? Very often, especially as new graduates, we're feeling as being nervous and ready to do whatever the person tells you to do. This is kind of a different thinking. So yes, you're going to follow up with a resume and all the information they ask for, but how do you ask the other person to do something for you that helps further you along in your job search? Well, if you're going to get the other person to do something, well, before you get them to do it, you clearly have to get them to believe something about you by the time you're done meeting. They have to have an attitude about you that they're thinking, wow, this person is worth investing more time with, or it's worth it to me to do it. And you have to get validation that they actually believe what you're telling them. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then lastly, if you're going to get them to believe something about you, you want to make sure you understand what's necessary in terms of the information you need. And this is not the kind of information that you can find online about the company. It's what do you want to find out from them that's just specific to that contact or specific to that opportunity that would help you better share your skills in this conversation. So let me give you some more examples so it makes sense. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So actions. So here's a question. This is the chance to chat away. So what are some potential actions that you could ask someone to do after you meet with them? What would you want, either it's a networking contact or even a hiring manager, what would you like them to do after the meeting? I want you to jump into the chat and give me some ideas of what would be some ideal things for somebody to do. I'm giving you time to type here. See who's still with us. Come on, help me out here. Somebody type in. What do you think you can ask them to do? What's the ideal thing?
Here we go.
Okay, it says, please contact me if you hear of good opportunities. That's a great one. Hire me. Great. Hire me. Ask for a time frame. Those are absolutely. Those are great responses. So yeah, absolutely. The first one I have is hire me as well. So please follow up. So those are great responses. So depending on the timing, you know, if it's the first time you're meeting with someone and you're meeting for coffee and it's not a formal interview, hire me may not be the most appropriate thing to ask, but by all means, if you're in the situation where it warrants it, absolutely you need to ask for the job if you think you're the right fit and you've proved that to them. Another thing you can do is say, well, can you introduce me to someone? Can you introduce me to the hiring manager? Or can you speak to my references? So proactively, they are taking the time to understand how I'm doing, you know, can you speak to what my experience is? In this example, this is for a public relations job. I get this a lot, but can you introduce me to another, you know, PR employee who actually works in your company? So even if they don't have an opening, can you get better information and better educate yourself from another candidate that works at that company? Minimally, would that person agree to meet with you again? Part of this process is really not just meeting people and moving on. It's how do you establish a relationship and a network with people that makes them want to talk to you again. So maybe right now there is no job opening. Maybe you just met for coffee. They understand your skills. They understand your value. They're like, look, we just don't have anything, but you know, stay in touch. And if you can stay in touch, top of mind, chances are you'll have a better chance of being considered for an opening when it does come, as opposed to not staying in touch. And these are good. So we're going to, someone also said here too, if you get rejected, we're going to talk about that next. So these are great feedback. So those are some sample actions. Well, if someone's going to do those things, clearly they need to believe something about you before they agree to do it. So if you want them to do something for you, what are some ideas of they can believe about you? Now, this is specific to public relations. So I kind of put these in, and I put them in quotes for a reason. Because you actually want the person saying back to you, saying, yes, I believe you can increase the number of clicks on our website. You demonstrated that by what you showed me. And the only way they're going to say it back is that you have to ask them if they agree. And that's to the point of what someone had chatted earlier of, you know, understanding almost the objection during the meeting. It's really, really important to know where you stand, as opposed to waiting by the phone for 3 weeks, hoping that someone will call. You know, I believe that you are technologically current. You can, you know, manage the PR that we need on Twitter and Facebook. I believe that you have benefits that you can bring to us that are actually greater than the cost to hire you. We didn't get into this too deeply, but every time you have a benefit, there's also a cost for someone to bring you on. And if you can make sure that the benefits and you can justify yourself that you can potentially bring in revenue or other ways, becomes easy for them to hire you because you don't seem so expensive because you're going to do some really innovative things for them. You understand our needs, and you can fit in our culture. So these are just examples. You know, this has to be customized for your interaction, but thinking through what you want that person to actually believe about you. And then lastly, from the planning standpoint, well, if you want them to believe these things, what do you just need to ask them in order to understand the job better? So beyond what's on the posted job requisition, asking them really insightful questions that you can't get the answers to. Things like, how do you measure success? What does success look like for you or someone in this position? You know, what are some qualities that help someone to be successful? What skills did the previous person have? Why were they successful? Challenges, almost in a consultative role. You want to understand their pain points and why things have been difficult. They have to hire someone. So you realize, so from a planning standpoint, you are actually planning this way. So, and I'll show you what the whole thing looks like this way. So you plan top down. You plan out first your actions, then your attitudes, then your answers. But when you execute, when you actually have the meeting, you start with your answers first. You start with your questions first. So tell me about yourself. Tell me about, you know, how you measure success for this role. And then you get into, let me share with you the skills I have and how I think I can add value to your company through the attitudes. And then only when they agree, so at this point, after you share the attitude, you say, well, based on what I shared with you, would you agree that I could be a fit? Would you agree that I have some skills, that these are skills that you're looking for? Then when you get the concurrence, you can go ahead and ask for the actions to do something. If they say no, and it's very uncomfortable, but at least you know on the spot. Maybe you forgot to tell them something. Maybe it's a certain certification that you just don't have, and now you need to go get if you want that kind of position. So it's just a structured thinking process. So, and I'll anticipate a question. A lot of people say to me, well, when I go into an interview, I can't control all this. I can't come in with a whole plan to ask all my questions because they have a lot they want to ask me. And what I would say is, yes, that's correct. They are going to ask their questions, but there is always time at the end when they say, do you have any questions for me? And the answer 100% of the time should be yes. And you still have the opportunity to go through some of these components if they weren't addressed in the meeting. And you should not be leaving the meeting with like, great, thank you, that was great. You should have a clear understanding of asking them to do something for you if they actually think you have the right skills. Because that's again, how you start to differentiate yourself. When you assert yourself and ask for things, that keeps them in the loop. They have to now get back to you. They have to now talk to you again, and it just continues the process. So this is just some guidelines for writing it down. You plan top down, but you execute from the bottom up, and really can be used for all interactions. So those are the 4 components that we step through. And before I wrap up, I have a couple key points, and I thought this would be helpful for parents who are on the call today. I get the question a lot of saying, well, what can I do to help my student? Sometimes we're in conflict. They're now a young adult. They don't always want to hear what I have to say. So this is some advice for the parents on the phone, and if students would like to hear as well, maybe you can get a sense of maybe things for yourself you can think about. The first one is help your student be aware of their skills and what they have to offer. Sometimes I find it's hard for young graduates to talk about themselves and feel that it's okay to speak about yourself in a way that highlights your skills, but not feel like you're bragging. I get that a lot, that they feel uncomfortable, that they feel like it's a little arrogant. It's not if you say it in the right way. But knowing what you're good at and knowing how you can help other people is really important. Absolutely, introductions to friends and colleagues, I suggest. Even just getting practice speaking with adults, even if it's in a social situation, it's graduation season, there's going to be lots of parties and social events. Just having your graduates speak to other adults, ask them what they do for a living and understand it, and be practice telling them what they're interested in doing. It's good practice, and it helps them to understand, and it's okay to make introductions. But you also have to be prepared. You can't just be like, just assuming. I see this a lot. There's a lot of assumption when a student has a connection from a parent, they're just going to get the job. And what I'm seeing over and over again is that it's still a professional interaction, and you have to have the right things to portray to get the job. It can't just be because you're a friend of the family. It's still business, and people make business decisions that way. So with that, I am at 35 minutes, as I promised, and I'm happy to take any questions on the chat. If you want to ask me some questions, I'm happy to take them. While you're doing that, I will also put up on the screen some upcoming events that we have on the month of June. We're pretty busy with a lot of things going on. So if you wanted to come see us in person, if you want to hear us on the radio, we have events coming up as well. Any questions from anyone? I'll give it a minute for the chat to come up.
I think it's so important that you said that about don't let them feel like they're bragging. They're not bragging if they're talking about themselves.
Right.
It was funny because I was watching Survivor last night, and the girl who won the $1 million said, the reason I should win is because I am this, 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 this. And I was watching it with a college freshman who said, oh, she shouldn't talk about herself like that. And I was like, why? That's wonderful. You should talk about yourself. She wasn't bragging.
No one else will promote you except for yourself.
Next question.
Okay, what role does your social media presence play? That is a fantastic question. It's important. It's really important, and something I always talk to graduates about is you need to go back through any social media profile and anything with any alcohol in your hand, any kind of risky or not full dress photos or anything that's being perceived as partying, even though this is where you've been, it's not seen well by an employer. And even more so, everyone should get on LinkedIn. Every graduate, doesn't matter what your profession, if you're an art student, PR, any type of interest, even in the nonprofit, needs to be on LinkedIn. That's where people look you up and see what you're about, and you should have a clear picture of what you have studied and what your skills are and what you're looking for. And social media is important, especially now. People do sometimes even eliminate candidates if they see anything that's questionable. It's really, really important, something I emphasize quite a bit. And so thank you for that great question.
Can I interject? We did do a LinkedIn webinar, so if you want to check out our YouTube channel, you can look there to know if you don't know how to start your page or if you want to start a page. So that's something.
Great.
There's more questions coming in.
Great point. Yeah.
Rising senior in college.
Rising senior. So what's the right time to start my job search? That's a great question. So it's always earlier is better than later. What I say is that even if you're not sure about what you want to do, the process of talking to people and networking before the job is posted is really important. Many students come to me and say, well, I don't understand. I've applied to hundreds of jobs. I don't get one. The reality is the chances of getting a job, of just applying to it and not knowing someone in that company are practically impossible. You have to network and talk to people who are in roles that you want, especially when they're not hiring, when you're not in the stressed out mode of, God, I really need this job or I really want the job. You want to make contacts with people when they're relaxed and they want to understand more about you and that you've taken the initiative to find out about them. So early as possible. In many schools, recruiting starts in October, September, October. So I'm working with students now to help them get ready for the fall recruiting, rising seniors. What was the other question? What can I do to make my LinkedIn stand out? I don't know if we have time to get into all that. I'll just say you have to be really clear and concise. And I think once you figure out knowing the kind of position you want and the kind of, you need to just make sure that your skills match, not that they match, but you're able to clearly articulate what you've accomplished. I like people to use quantitative measures of how they, even on their resume, whether it's like, I completed this many things, I did this number, I helped increase sales by this %. So as much as you can provide quantitative measures to what you've accomplished, even if you did a lemonade stand, even if it was volunteering, I organized 100 people to come to a walk that raised money. So just showing that you can quantify what you do does help with your LinkedIn profile, but that'll be another talk for another day. Sorry about that.
No, you can check out seriously the other webinar, but this kind of is in relation to it. What can she emphasize?
So what do you suggest that I emphasize on my resume? I am a much older student. I believe that my challenge to getting hired. I will tell you that I don't think it's about your resume. It's about talking to people that you want to connect with. And yes, your resume needs to follow along with your story. I feel like everything needs to, so when I talked about knowing your skills and the strategy and your value, that all needs to blend into your resume so it's clean. So when you show up to talk to someone, what you're saying is reflected on your resume. It's not disjointed. But I don't think the resume is not the sole thing that's going to get you hired. You have to reach out and talk to people and network in a way that, and by all means, network with your alumni. There's a fantastic tool, by the way, on LinkedIn called the LinkedIn Alumni Tool. It's for everybody, for every school, anywhere. And they tell you by geography, by major, by type of company, and you can filter through and see fellow alumni who are working in the places that you aspire to work to. Just talk to them. It's not about, do you have a job? It's, help me understand more about your role. How did you get there? Do you have any regrets? Would you have done anything different? The more you talk to people and let them know what you're doing, and then you better educate yourself, that's how you have better chances of getting a job when it comes up.
And we also have a private LinkedIn page for William Patterson alumni and also a mentoring program. So you can look into those things too.
Okay. Oh, great question. Do I send a thank you letter even after rejection from an employer? Yes. And I'm going to actually tell you to do one more thing. I think you should ask for a 5 to 10 minute phone call to understand why you didn't get the job. I'll give you a fast story. So Brittany, who I talked about earlier, she applied for a job in nonprofit when she first started out. And she made it to the 4th round interview. And she thought she had the job. And she didn't get it. And she was devastated. And I said to her, you have to call back and ask them why you didn't get it. And she said, no, 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 that's so embarrassing. I don't want to call. But I told her to call, and we planned out a call plan just to ask good questions. And they said to her the only reason she didn't get it is because the other candidate actually had 1 more year experience than her, but she's actually their next candidate they're about to call back and hire. So they were so impressed that she called and followed through. She now had an offer for a few months down the road. So it's not only saying thank you, but asking why you didn't get it. It's the only way you're going to learn as you progress of what you need to do better and help you in your interviews. What was another question? Should you only limit yourself to where you should live, or should you go outside your state? That really is a personal question, although I feel like when you're young, you have the least amount of restrictions on you, but that's really a financial decision. Family, I think you have to figure that out as to if you're moving out of state, do you have any support? Are you able to fully financially support yourself? Socially, all of those things, I think it has to get a sense of what you want. I can't, there's no right or wrong to that. I think it has to be the right fit for you.
I feel like these next two have to do with networking.
Okay, all right. I graduated in interpersonal communication. Who can I talk to find about other? Okay, so we talked about that too. But so the question is, who can I talk to find out about other career opportunities within my major? Same thing. Go to the LinkedIn alumni tool. And by the way, you can fake it and say you went to a different school. Put in Seton Hall, put in Rutgers, put in NYU, but it'll still bring up people with that major. So if you're looking to meet people in this tri-state area, and by the way, you can just filter in LinkedIn and just say, I'm looking for somebody who has this kind of job. You need to start connecting with them. And it can be, I'm a recent graduate. Would you be so kind to spend 10 minutes with me? Most people are pretty sympathetic to speak to new graduates for a few minutes. You just have to be prepared and know what you're doing. I made up business cards, and I've been talking and handing out my cards to everyone. I think that's a good idea. I do think it's good to have a business card that just has your name and number and detail. But again, it shouldn't just be handing it out. The same thing, like you don't want to just drop off your resume. You want to talk to people with a plan in mind of what you're going to say and what you want them to come away with when they're done talking to you. All right, those were great questions. I really, unless there's any others, I really appreciate hold on, another one.
This is the business card.
I then connect with them on LinkedIn. Great. So that's great to connect on LinkedIn. I mean, the more people you can connect with, the better you are. And networking is key to this whole thing. I get a lot. People say, well, how come the resume is not enough? It's just not. It's just not. The scanning that goes on, there's a lot of computer automation now with resumes. Oh, how can I write my resume in the job description? It doesn't, clearly you do have to change your objective. Do not keep the same objective for every job because they're not all the same. But your skills are your skills and your background is what it is. I think you need to think about which ones demonstrate the skills that might be needed for a certain job. So if this job requires leadership, think about which jobs you've had that demonstrated leadership. If this job requires more detailed or analytical skills, then maybe you just move the order around of how you highlight it.
I just want to say it was funny, Beth just said put in the keywords because there's so much automation with your resumes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat on a panel with 2 HR people from 2 big companies, and they both said they're starting to not do that now because they were missing out on people who they thought had the personality, mm-hmm. had the drive, and they're starting to look for like full people. They put mm-hmm. it now, So you never know what's going to happen, but it's still a good idea.
Any other questions? Those were great. I really appreciate everyone's participation and active. And just show you one last thing, we were lucky enough to be featured in NJ Biz a few weeks ago. They did an article on us. So if you want to just type in a next great step at NJ Biz, you can read the whole article and kind of explains more about what we do.
And Beth had her contact information on the
Yes.
previous slide,
Yes.
so if anybody wants to take that down, we also can send you. Can we send a PDF to
Yeah,
everybody
absolutely.
with this on it? And feel free to contact her. And thank you for doing this. It was really, really very interesting. I think everyone liked joining in on the conversation. So if you have any further questions, let us know. And we have a little survey after this if you could fill it out. And otherwise, thank you for coming to our webinar. Thank you for presenting that.
My pleasure.
Really
thank you, everyone, for joining. We really, really appreciate your time.